This week, Tennessean lawmakers passed a resolution in the House that would prevent any flag other than the American flag from being flown in public school classrooms. Democratic activists were quick to point out that this bill discriminates against members of the LGBTQIA divided plus ampersand that little troll emoji community by preventing them from hanging rainbow flags from every flagpole in the land. We here at the Chrestman Conversation grabbed the nearest purple-haired person we could find to get their thoughts on the issue. In a quote, they said, "This is literally worse than the Holocaust," which we actually support now in the name of Hamas. So this is really the only Holocaust we care about. We literally, figuratively, will die if this bill becomes law, because without the ability to indoctrinate young people into our weird cult, they might grow up to have common sense and a love for country. And then who would continue our activism? End quote. I'm Tyler Chrestman. Welcome to the Chrestman Conversation. I don't know if people could tell, but I've been having some fun with those intros recently. They're kind of entertaining to me, so I hope you like them too. If not, too bad. I'm going to keep doing them. So before we get into the topic for this week, I want to highlight my weekly comment from last week's video. So last week, Tim Majors 5017 said, quote, "That's your opinion. You have the right to it. I have the right to disagree, but I understand your argument. It's just disturbing to me how slave owner children, in parentheses here, descendants, are always trying to explain to the slave children, parentheses, descendants, how reparations, all caps, can't be done. Also what racism is and isn't doing. To me, that's a form of racism within itself." End quote. Okay, so this gentleman left a few comments on that. A couple of them accused me of lying or being racist, but we're going to ignore that and just try and adjust this. Clearly, the guy didn't watch the video, but the idea, and I said this, you can go back and look through the comments, I said this on the video. My thing about reparations is that it's completely an unworkable process. If you wanted to say that reparations should have been done in the follow-up from the Civil War, I absolutely would agree. But now you can't fast forward and say we're going to give reparations to the black community in America, because many members of the black community in America are not descendants of slaves, and the overwhelming majority of white people in this country are not descendants of slaves, had nothing to do with slavery, came to the country after slavery had been a thing. Not to mention there are tens of millions of Hispanics and Asians who also live in the United States that had nothing to do with slavery. So it's just a completely unworkable process. That's my entire thing here. And to say that is not racism, to say that we shouldn't give reparations to people who have nothing to do with slavery, and then to say, well, your ancestors may have been descendants of slaves. Well, okay, but if your descendants, if you're white and your descendants had nothing to do with slavery, why should then all the money that you pay into the federal government be used to pay somebody who had nothing to do with slavery? You're taking money from people who were never slave owners, and you're giving it to people who were never slaves. It's just an unworkable system in 2024. That was my entire point. I don't know if the gentleman understood that, but that's that. Now, on to this week's topic. As we said in the intro, this is about Tennessee, and it's about the House of Representatives in Tennessee. It's a bit unusual for me to focus on specific state topics, but this one has broader implications, which is always the goal of the podcast, to talk about things that have broader implications. I think that this is an important discussion that needs to be had. I've actually thought this recently about Congress. I think Congress should pass this law too, because the amount of representatives in Congress who are hanging foreign flags outside of their office is just astounding. If the federal government is paying you as a member of the government, you should not be hanging a foreign flag outside of your office. I don't see how that conflicts with the First Amendment principle that only the American flag should be flown from government buildings. Anyway, that's a whole different thing. I want to get into the details of the bill that we are going to talk about today. The bill in Tennessee was sponsored by Representative Gino Bulso, a Republican from Brentwood, and the bill would prohibit the display of any flag that, quote, and this is a quote from the bill, quote, represents a political viewpoint, including but not limited to a partisan, racial, sexual orientation, gender, or other ideological viewpoint. Now, that was in the bill. The bill also went on to carve out a couple other things, which we will go over, but that was basically the thing that people are talking about this week. The House members passed that bill, House Bill 1605, on a party line vote of 70 to 24. The Republicans have a supermajority in Tennessee. So they passed the bill on a party line vote with one member who voted present, which means that they just abstained. Now, by the way, several Democrats had to be escorted out of this proceeding, including one, I believe, I didn't actually Google this prior to this, but I think it was the same guy who was recently expelled from the Tennessee House, and then they reinstated him back in for basically mounting an insurrection. When Democrats disrupt the proceedings of the government, it tends to be viewed as protest. When Republicans do it, it tends to be viewed as an insurrection and everyone gets to go to prison. I don't understand why that, well, I shouldn't say that. I do understand why that's the case because of the hypocrisy in government and the law, but I do not understand why we tolerate it. If you're going to say it is a crime to interrupt governmental proceedings, which I think it should be, you can't just run into the House and protest there. You can protest. There are so many places you can stage protests, but disrupting governmental proceedings is a crime. It is. So Democrats commit a crime, no big deal. Republicans commit it, they go to prison for forever. So anyway, but that did happen. The bill itself, though, is what we want to get into, not just the hypocrisy in the government. We all know about that. I rail against that basically every week on the podcast. But the bill itself, is it good? Is it bad? As I kind of just teased a bit, I'm not opposed to this bill. I think that there is a fundamental lack of understanding about what the role of government is and whether or not the government has the ability to wield power the way that it does. Does the government have the ability to restrict freedom of expression from public school teachers in their own classrooms? The answer to this is yes. Yes, they do. Now, there are a lot of people, as I always talk about, I am a very huge proponent of the First Amendment. It is the amendment that separates us from most countries. A lot of countries have different laws that are similar to a lot of our different laws when it comes to judicial proceedings or being the ability to face your accuser in court, the right against self-incrimination. There are countries that have this. No country has First Amendment protections like the United States. So it is very important. The first and the second are very important amendments to the Constitution. The First Amendment, what it says is, Congress shall make no law abridging freedom of speech. That is what the actual amendment is about. Can the government, can Congress really, the federal government, make a law restricting the freedom of speech of regular citizens? The answer to that seems to be overwhelmingly no, as it should be. But does a state government have the ability to restrict the speech of a state employee in a state employment setting? So, for example, if you work in a government office, if you work in the state house, could they say that you can't fly Nazi memorabilia in the state house if you're an elected representative? Yes, they have that authority. This is fairly well established. You're not allowed to do these things when you're a state employment, or when you're under state employment as a state actor. Public school classrooms are state-owned. Make no difference about who's in there teaching. You are a state government employee when you are representing the state and the curriculum set forward by the state. The state has the ability to control what does and does not go on in that classroom. So, I'm adjusting a setting here. So do Tennessean lawmakers, not we, I'm not in the Tennessean legislature, they have the ability to do this. Is it good? Now, the bill itself, we just read the part of it that people are pointing to, the activists are upset about. Again, the quote is, they can't display any flags that represent a political viewpoint, including but not limited to partisan, racial, sexual, gender, other ideological viewpoints. So you are not allowed to display the rainbow flag, the trans-inclusive flag, or a flag that I would guess says Black Lives Matter. You're not allowed to display any of this. Now, this also includes some other flags that people aren't talking about. So there are certain flags that are exceptions to this rule. I guess Tennessee has a historical flag law, something along this. I don't remember what it's actually called, but something like a historical flag law that says that there are certain flags that can be displayed. One of those flags that people are pointing to is the Confederate flag. The Confederate flag is protected under the Tennessean law that says it can be displayed. So people are saying, well, you're okay with a racist Confederate flag being hung in classrooms, but not a rainbow flag. Where are your priorities? Now, I'm not going to debate the merits of the Confederate flag here right now, but what I am going to say is, if you don't like it, you can change the law. You have the ability, but you have to win elections. People elect Republicans in Tennessee because they want a Republican priorities put forward. One of the things that has been a gigantic driving point, in Virginia, it probably won Glenn Youngkin the governorship, is school transparency. Transparency of what goes on in school, school choice, these kind of things that propel Republicans to victory. Because it turned out during the pandemic that people found out a lot about what goes on in schools, and they aren't really happy about it. And it's become a gigantic fighting point among Republicans and Democrats. And this is a losing issue for Democrats. Don't make no mistake about it. Not necessarily the rainbow flag bit of this, because most people don't really care about the rainbow flag, but the school aspect of this, when he's making her appearance right now, she's jumping up in my lap, the school choice aspect of this, what goes on in schools, this is a losing position for Democrats. And they're going to lose this fight big at the polls if this is the issue that they choose to fight on. If you have a child in school, a small child, let's imagine grade school age, and you go on the first day of school, you get to meet the teacher. And the teacher has let's just make it an extreme case. They have an anarchist flag, an Antifa flag, hung up in their classroom. They have a tattoo that you find offensive. Should you have the right to say, well, I don't want my child educated by this person? I think the answer is yes. Yes, you should. Because you can view that person and you say, I'm going to leave my child alone with this person for 8 hours a day. What are they teaching my child that's not math and science? What kind of views do this person express to my child? And are they the kind of person that I think is capable of educating a child in a good way? These are questions that you have a right as a parent to ask of your teachers. You are employing them. Make no mistake about it. You pay taxes. Your taxes pay teacher salaries. They are employees of the government. They do, in a sense, work for you. This doesn't mean you get to mistreat them. This doesn't mean you get to make irrational or unrealistic expectations or demands of them. But it does mean there is some accountability in that position. So the lawmakers come in. They say any flag that divides people has to be taken out. And believe it or not, yes, the rainbow flag, I actually am not even going to talk about the rainbow flag, for example. Let's talk about the trans flag. The one that they took the rainbow and they made it worse. The flag with the light blue and the pink and the brown and the black and the little triangle that comes in from the end. The stupid flag that entirely missed the point of the rainbow flag. That flag is divisive. I don't like that flag. That flag is ridiculous to me because that flag took what should be a unifying message. And believe it or not, that's what the rainbow flag was supposed to be. The rainbow flag, the idea behind the rainbow flag is that it encompasses everything. It's the color spectrum. It's everything, which just meant about inclusivity. That's what it meant. The trans flag is ideological. It's not the same. We put the black and the brown stripe in there, and we got to represent all these different things. Well, the black and the brown are actually supposed to be represented in the rainbow. The reason why you say that is because the rainbow is the color spectrum. All the color that you can see is right there. It's the color spectrum. So the idea was that it includes everybody. It's not that black and brown are excluded from the rainbow. The rainbow, the whole point of it as a symbol was that it includes everybody. So the trans flag is ideological. It pushes the whole Black Lives Matter thing and a trans ideology that most people can't actually get behind. So you say, should a teacher have the ability to display these things that you don't like? Again, if it was a Nazi flag, I wouldn't want it up in a classroom that my child went to. If it was a flag a hammer and sickle, you don't want that up. If it's a flag that represents Antifa or the Ku Klux Klan, any of this stuff is divisive in its own way. Again, I'm not even specifically talking about the rainbow flag, but I do not believe government employees, which is what school teachers are, have the right to push anything that is ideological onto children. Anything. Even things I agree with. I don't want it pushed on children. That's not your role as an educator. And does the state have the right to tell you that you're not allowed to do that? Absolutely they do. And they should. It is their role as people who oversee education to say, these are what people elected. This is what we're going to do. If people don't like it, they don't elect those people. That is the goal. That is how representative government works. And it should be a local as possible. Your school board has say over the school. If you don't like it, you should change your school board. You should organize. You should do these things. You can win those kind of elections. Anyway, it's not a First Amendment violation because the school has a say, or the state has a say over the school. And it's not a free speech violation because as a government employee, you don't actually have free speech in your place of employment in the way that you think that you do. If you're a member of the military, you can't also be anti-government. It doesn't really work that way. And it shouldn't work that way because if your job is to get a role in government, to undermine government, you are not actually doing your job. It's like the entire character of Ron Swanson from Parks and Rec. That person shouldn't be in the government. You should drum him out. If his whole job is to ruin your thing, they're not entitled to be there. So when you put somebody in a classroom and you want to say it's bigoted to say that you can't hang a trans flag or a rainbow flag in your classroom, you should ask them why that should be acceptable when they are the exact same people who will complain about the Confederate flag. These are the exact same people. That Venn diagram overlaps entirely. The people who say, well, I should be able to put my pride flag because it's inclusive. Well, some people don't view it that way. And you have to remember that. Some people don't view things the way that you view them, just like you don't view things the way other people view them. No one's the same. No one has the same views. When you put up something that has a political bent, and believe it or not, the rainbow has been politicized. I don't know if it was conservatives who did it first. I don't know if it was liberals who did it first. But the rainbow is politicized now in a way that it wasn't, even when it started, it wasn't necessarily as political as it is today. So, no, you don't have the right to hang a flag in your class. You don't have the right in Congress. I don't think you should be hanging Palestinian flags or Israeli flags, for that matter, outside of doors at Congress. When the embassy, the United States Embassy, hangs a rainbow flag from the flagpole, the person who is in charge of that decision should be fired immediately. The American flag is supposed to unite people. This is what it's supposed to do. The American flag is what unites us because we're all Americans and we all should remember that. Your state government flag is fine. Your local government flag, St. Louis City has a flag. It's cool. We have one in front of the building that I live in. You have an American flag hung higher than the state flag, and you have, or hung higher than the city flag, and then you have the city flag. And that's fine. These are fine. These are fine flags. There are other flags. The Gadsden flag, the rainbow flag. Hang them. If you want to hang them in your house, or you want to hang them off the side of your house, do what you want. That's not what we're saying. That's not what we're talking about. If that teacher wants to take that rainbow flag home and hang it from your home, that's your choice. No one's going to restrict you. That would be against the law. That would be a violation. They're not allowed to tell private citizens what to do with their speech in their home. That's ridiculous. But your classroom is not that. Your classroom is government property. You don't own it. It's not yours. The government has the right to say what you can do with and without government property. If I went to the police station or the firehouse and you hang a flag off of the side of the building, that's not your federal, state, or local flag, chances are it's not going to stand. Now, as I'm saying this, I remember there are a couple exceptions to this rule that Tennessee has. I think, if I remember correctly, there are some military flags that are exempt. The POW, the MIA POW flag is exempt. And some of the historical flags. Like I said, I think the Confederate flag is actually exempt under Tennessee law. I'm not 100% on that, but I think so. But the point is that the military flag, the POW flag, these are symbols of the United States government. They represent the United States government. The MIA POW flag, for example, that is a flag, I believe it's been around since Vietnam. I could predate that, but I think at least since then. But it was about all the soldiers that we lost in Vietnam that were presumed dead and missing in action, presumed dead. And these flags are supposed to unify. That's what they're supposed to do. The government can say you can hang government flags from the building. They do have the right to do this. No First Amendment violation here. Those Democratic lawmakers who are trying to claim bigotry are misguided in what they believe the role of the state is and what's bigoted. To say we shouldn't be promoting gender ideology to children, they'll say that's bigoted. That's ridiculous. The whole drag queen story hour thing, for example, I was just talking on the phone to someone about this recently. The whole idea behind that is ridiculous to me because, one, drag performance has always been inherently sexual. Have you ever been to a drag show? They are sexualized performances of exaggerated female characteristics. That's what they are. And they're fun. I've been to a couple. They're fun. You know, I was down in Miami. I went to the Palace. It's great. It's a great time. But is it appropriate for children? No. No, it's not appropriate for children. What does that have to do with anything? And if a drag queen came in and read to children, okay, no one cares. Not really. But the problem is that now it's used to promote an ideology. Then you politicize the act. You say, well, now we're going to do it all over the place. Well, okay, the fact that one did it somewhere and was fine. But then this is how you get videos of grown men dressed like women dancing provocatively for a bunch of 5-year-olds. And you say, well, now you're defending this because you want to pretend that Drag Queen Story Hour is just about some guy coming in and reading to kids. And it's not. Now it's this dancing. Now it's this, oh, well, if you're against this, you're a bigot. I don't care. I don't care that drag queens exist. Like I said, I've been to drag shows. They're fun, whatever. Who cares? But you say, well, it's good for children. Well, now you're overstepping your role as an educator. What is the role of an educator? It's to, this is something that I think most teachers now don't even understand. The role of an educator, what is it? Your job is to educate children. But how do you do it? Most teachers think it's by telling kids what they should think, telling them what's good, what's bad, and then expecting them to listen to you and say, oh, well, I know all the answers. Here they are. There you go, kids. That's not the role of an educator. That's not how you educate people. You don't educate people by telling them dates and facts and information and then them regurgitating it. That's not education. That's indoctrination. The way you educate kids is by getting them to think about topics. And most teachers, applies from grade school on up through college. Most teachers seem to be in the opposite class of this, which is that they just tell people what to think. And if you disagree with them, they just think you're wrong. The Socratic method of teaching used to just be about asking questions and getting kids to engage. And whenever you see a teacher doing this, it almost seems performative now because it's so rare, so unique to see a teacher actually educating. There was that video that went around. We didn't play a clip of it on the podcast, but I'm sure a lot of people saw it, of a professor in college who was asked a question by a student. This teacher said, well, given J.K. Rowling's transphobia, blah, 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 blah. I don't remember the exact question. But the teacher said, well, let's stop right there and let's go over a couple things. Why is J.K. Rowling transphobic? And the student said, oh, well, people say, and he said, I'm not interested in what people say. Why do you think that J.K. Rowling's transphobic? And he said, well, I don't know. If we Google things, I think she's probably said some transphobic. He said, okay, well, stop right there. Fine, why don't you Google and you find me some examples of what, and then they go through this whole process. He just keeps asking questions. Well, why do you think that? What about this? What do you have? What evidence do you have of that? And he forced this person in real time to do this exercise where they had to examine why they started a question with, given J.K. Rowling's transphobia. He said, well, I'm not going to just give that to you. You have to demonstrate to me why you think that. And he didn't have an answer. And at the end, he said, well, actually, I couldn't really find anything, so now I just feel foolish. He said, don't feel foolish. He said, this is how you should treat everything in life. You should treat everything like somebody gives you a piece of information. You should examine it from every different angle, and eventually you come to your own thoughts, your own opinions, and your own conclusions. But when you hear someone say, J.K. Rowling's transphobic, And then you go, oh, yeah, what a transphobe. And then you just carry that opinion with you without ever examining it ever. You're not doing yourself any service. And most teachers don't teach kids to think like this. That's how you wind up with people in college who have never examined anything that they believe in depth because they've heard it. A great example of that is the gender wage gap. If people in college in their 20s, adults, grown women and men, will cite the gender pay gap as an example of the patriarchy, in just confirming that they've never deeply thought about this issue ever, but just have heard it. You've heard it from people. People do that all the time. And teachers, the role of an educator is to get them to stop. When you hear something, you don't adopt it as fact. You don't adopt it as law until you are aware of where it comes from and if it's true. The role of educators has changed. Now you don't get that. Now teachers, they put those videos up on TikTok all the time of them talking about their personal lives. Oh my gosh, today is the day I came out as non-binary genderqueer to my 5-year-olds. I was so nervous. And they have a video that they put online of themselves talking about this with their kids. I didn't know anything about my teachers' personal lives when I was a child. When did we start thinking that that was the best way to educate kids, is if they all have to know about your weird whatever it is you got going on in your personal life? Again, I'm sure I had gay teachers when I was a kid. I had a lot of teachers. There were a lot of people. But you know what we didn't do? We didn't just sit around and talk about it because it wasn't necessary. And I get it. Times have changed. We've gone on 20-something years since I was in grade school. It's fine. If you're gay, to just say, well, I'm gay. Okay. Oh, teacher, Mr. Chris, what about your wife? Oh, well, I have a husband. Okay. Why do we don't need to talk about it past that. If you think that it's appropriate, you don't have to hide yourself. I'm not saying that. But the idea that you're going to make yourself front and center in this world, things that you care about, and you specifically, if you're a teacher and if you're the kind who hangs the trans flag, do I think that you are also the kind who are going to push an ideology on children? Of course I do. Of course I do, because I just see it all day on the internet. I see teachers making examples of themselves as to everything that the right wing fears about schools. They just put it out there online. And then when people get pushback, they say, oh my gosh, look at all these bigots. It has nothing to do with bigotry. I don't care if you're a gay teacher. It doesn't matter to me. Why would I care? Just like I don't care that if you're a black teacher. I don't care about these things. Why would anyone care about these things? I don't. But when you say then that the things that you're going to educate children about are going to lean to one side or the other politically, well, then you've actually done a disservice to kids, because your job is not to tell them how to think politically. Your job is to teach them to think. Math and science and even things like politics, you can teach that to a kid. But a good teacher, at the end of that class, your class should have no idea what you think politically, because it's not your role as a teacher to tell them that. Your role is to get them to debate topics and think about topics and critically examine their ideas. And that's not what teachers do. Actually, I did this last week. I'm going to do it again. I got a book I'm going to grab. Actually, it's going to be 2 books. So last week, by the way, I reread. Last week I recommended that Fire Next Time by James Baldwin. I reread it. Still great. Still a great book. 1963, by the way, was the year that was written. So I grabbed 2 books I want to show to all my teachers out there that you should read. They are very short. Look at this book. So thin. It's like 40 pages. This is On the Art of Teaching by Horace Mann, where what this book does is describe the role of an educator. And let's see. Look at 30 pages. So short. Very, very tiny book. And just go ahead and give it a read. This is your goal as an educator. This is what a teacher should be, what an educator should be. Educate yourself and do just a tiny, tiny, tiny bit of reading. That takes you a half hour. Not even. And then this one is for all the other people out there. This is another book that you should know. Very short. This is the American Flag Handbook. This is a book on how to treat the American flag and why that's important. This whole flag debate really is not about a flag. It's about the fact that everything in this country is divisive now. And we need to stop that in the classrooms. And I think it's going to be up to Republicans to do it, because the Democrats think of themselves as the good guys. And if you're the good guy, that means you keep fighting. You keep fighting against those evil, mean, nasty Republicans. And you do that by getting the children on your side and blah, blah, blah. It's wrong. They're wrong when they think that. But they do think that. They earnestly believe themselves to be the heroes. And when you're a hero, any tactic is good. But the thing that they're doing right now, they passed laws about how schools can keep secrets from parents and they don't have to tell their parents. You can be a boy, go to school, pretend to be a girl at school, come home, and the school will actually not tell you that your child is going by different pronouns or adopted a different name. And there are actually schools and states that think that this is a good thing. Turning children, creating a gap, creating a bridge between children and their parents, that is something that every totalitarian government has attempted to do since the dawn of time. It's what the bad guys do. And you can do it and you can say, well, we're the good guys, so we're allowed to do it. But it's wrong. You're wrong to do this. And it's what educators are doing, and it's what bills like this are supposed to fight back against. Because if you think that it's your job as an educator to bring your sexual identity to the classroom, you're wrong. If your argument is, well, we just want to make sure they know we're inclusive. Okay, that's fine. I think it's good that kids should be able to find a teacher that they can confide in. You want to have an adult that people feel like if they had a problem, they can go to. That is important in a kid's life. I won't deny that. But the idea that you can only do that by bringing your political ideology to bear is misplaced. It's misguided. And so I wish that they would get the message without having to resort to the things that they're doing. Like I said, indoctrinating kids is not a good thing. Anyway, that's all I have. That's all my thoughts on this case. I'm sure I'm missing some things in here, some important parts of this that I should address. So if anyone has any questions, comments, concerns, or things you think I should have talked about on this one, hit me up in the comments. As we said, I'm going to start highlighting a comment each week on the podcast from last week's episode. So who knows? You could get a shout out on the Chrestman Conversation when you feel fancy then. Anyway, we're going to leave it there for the week. I'm Tyler Chrestman. I'll catch you guys next Friday.